What kind of king wears a crown made of thorns? Throughout history, rulers have adorned themselves with gold and jewels, symbols of their power and wealth. Yet the most influential king in human history wore thorns pressed into his flesh. This is not just a moment of cruelty, it's a moment of revelation. Let's walk into the courtyard where Jesus was crowned with pain and love. The Roman governor had made his decision. "I find no basis for a charge against him," Pilate had said. Yet he handed Jesus over to be crucified, surrendering to the pressure of the crowd. The soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium, the governor's headquarters, and gathered the whole company around him. This was a moment of entertainment for them, a break from their routine duties. They saw before them not the Son of God, but a failed revolutionary, another Jewish troublemaker whose claims could be mocked before his execution. They stripped him and dressed him in a purple robe, purple the color of royalty, used not to honor but to mock. With rough hands, they wove together a crown of thorns, pressing it onto his head until blood ran down his face. These were not small, delicate thorns, but long, sharp spikes from desert plants, capable of piercing deeply into flesh. They placed a staff in his right hand as a mock scepter. Then the soldiers knelt before him, their faces twisted with cruel laughter. "Hail, King of the Jews!" The mockery continued as they spat on him, striking him on the head with the staff, driving the thorns deeper. Each blow was met with laughter, each insult with more degradation. They slapped his face, pulled his beard, and heaped scorn upon him. Perhaps some remembered how just days before, crowds had welcomed this man into Jerusalem with shouts of "Hosanna!" Now those shouts were replaced with jeers and taunts. The King of Kings, the Lord of all creation, stood before them as an object of ridicule. Yet through it all, Jesus remained silent. No threats escaped his lips, no curses, no calls for divine intervention. Isaiah had prophesied centuries before. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. He who could have summoned legions of angels chose instead to bear the humiliation. He was indeed a king, but not as they imagined. His kingdom was not of this world, and his power was revealed not in dominance but in submission. The crown of thorns did not dishonor him. It revealed the very essence of his mission. While the soldiers thought they were mocking his claims to royalty, they were unwittingly participating in his true coronation. Every thorn that pierced his skin proclaimed the truth. This king came to suffer for his subjects. In this cruel parody of royal investiture, Jesus was fulfilling his destiny as the suffering servant, the sacrificial lamb, the Messiah who would save his people not through military might, but through sacrificial love. The pain was real. Blood streamed down his face, mingling with sweat and tears. Each thorn brought fresh agony to the one who had done no wrong. The physical torture was matched by the emotional anguish, rejected by his own people, abandoned by his closest friends, and soon to face the ultimate separation from his Father. But in this moment of extreme suffering, true kingship was on display. Not kingship as the world defines it, with pomp and power and privilege, but kingship as God defines it, with sacrifice and service and selfless love. Jesus had taught his followers, "The kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who exercise authority over them call themselves benefactors. But you are not to be like that. Instead, the greatest among you should be like the youngest, and the one who rules like the one who serves." Now, he embodied this teaching in the most profound way. His throne would be a cross, his crown made of thorns, his royal robe stained with blood. This was leadership redefined, power reimagined, greatness reborn. This king came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. The crown of thorns symbolizes the price of love, pain, surrender, humility. The Son of God, who deserved all glory and honor, allowed himself to be humiliated. He who was in very nature God did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the form of a servant. The thorns that pierced his brow were part of the curse that had fallen on creation after the first sin. In Genesis, God had declared to Adam that the ground would produce thorns and thistles. Now, the second Adam wore that curse upon his head, beginning the work of redeeming all creation. He humbled himself, bearing shame that was not his own, so that we might be exalted with him. The thorns that pierced his brow would ultimately lead to our healing. Every drop of blood that fell from his head was part of the price paid for our redemption. The mocking of soldiers became a symbol of sacrificial love that would transform the world. What began as an instrument of torture became an emblem of salvation. In a world obsessed with status and recognition, Jesus teaches us a different way. The crown of thorns stands in stark contrast to the crowns of this world. It challenges our understanding of greatness and success. It reminds us that in God's kingdom, the path to glory passes through the valley of humility. True authority comes not from asserting one's rights, but from laying them down for the good of others. Real power is found not in controlling others, but in serving them. The crown of thorns calls us to follow this king, not seeking positions of power or prominence, but serving others with the same selfless love that led Jesus to the cross. It invites us to embrace suffering for the sake of others, to choose the path of sacrifice rather than self-protection. To follow Jesus means to set aside our own comfort, to take up our cross daily, and to walk the way of self-giving love. It means rejecting the world's definition of success and embracing God's upside-down kingdom where the last become first. The humble are exalted, and losing one's life is the only way to truly find it. This is the paradox at the heart of our faith, that the King of Kings would wear thorns instead of gold, that the Lord of all would choose the way of suffering love, that victory would come through apparent defeat. In the crown of thorns, we see the fullness of God's love and the depth of his identification with human suffering. We see a king who reigns not from a distant throne, but from the midst of our pain. He humbled himself, even to death on a cross. Philippians 2:8. The crown of thorns was not the end. It was the beginning of redemption. In choosing to bear that painful coronation, Jesus opened the way for us to receive a crown of life that will never fade away. Subscribe to Faith Stories as we walk, day by day, toward the cross and the empty tomb. Praise the Lord.